So they should have added one more line to that. We've got some announcements this morning. We just want to say a big thank you to everyone that came out yesterday for the car wash and helped in whatever way you helped, whether it was holding a sign, scrubbing a wheel, wiping down a windshield, or whatever it was. We appreciate your help. Let's give everybody a hand. We've got a 15-minute gather and grow meeting today after service for anyone that wants to stay and take part in that. Just, it won't be very long, so we'll meet for just a few minutes after service today. Tuesday night prayer service is this Tuesday, April the 29th from 7 to 8 p.m. If you can, make plans to come and let's have a good time in prayer. We've got a church cleaning day Saturday, May the 3rd at 12 p.m. And as we've said before, the more hands on deck, the easier everything goes and the quicker everybody can get done and go about whatever it is they may want to do. So just keep that in mind. And it's time for Sunday school this morning. If you have your Bibles this morning, let's turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, the 11th chapter. Ecclesiastes is after Psalms and Proverbs. It's one of them kind of smaller books, hard to find sometimes. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 5. As thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, nor how the bones do grow in the womb of her that is with child, even so thou knowest not the works of God who maketh all. And you can be seated this morning. The verse says, as thou knowest not. Don't know the way of the Spirit, don't know how the bones grow in the womb of her that is with child, and don't know the works of God who maketh all. And I want to try to help us this morning with spiritual growth. This verse is talking about how the bones grow in the womb of her that is with child, and don't know how it all just really takes place and everything that really happens. And just like that, we don't know the way of the Spirit. And we don't know the works of God who maketh all. Sometimes we look at growth and look at ourselves even and think, well, I'm not growing very much, and I'm not advancing like I should be, and all the things that comes into mind. I know there's a lot of things that come into my mind sometimes in regards to spiritual growth. And I was listening to a preacher that's dead and gone now preach a message about growing spiritually, and I'm not copying his message in any way, but while he was preaching, the Lord showed me something about a man that I had never thought about before, in a way I'd never thought about it, and the way he grew, and it was spiritual growth, and that's what I want to go into today. In Genesis, the 37th chapter, everybody probably knows the story of Joseph and everything that he went through, but I want to go through this morning and bring out some things. In Genesis chapter 37, verse 5, it says that Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. And he told them his dream, how he was binding sheaves in the field, and they all were, him and his brethren, and his sheaves stood upright, and their sheaf came and bowed down to his sheaf. And then he said in verse 9 that he dreamed yet another dream, and he told it to his brethren and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And his brethren envied him because of these dreams, and he just wasn't liked very much by his brethren. And a lot of times that's where spiritual growth really begins, is when kind of everybody else don't like you. And I can preach this morning because I've experienced this personally. I've had these experiences, and people won't like you very much. Not everyone will dislike you. Jacob still loved his son, even though he dreamed a dream that in that dream it represented that his father would come and bow down to him one day. But his brethren hated him. And even though his brethren hated him, when his father asked him to go and go find his brothers, see how they are, he said, okay, I'll go. He said, here am I. So he goes to check on his brethren. It's hard to go check on somebody that don't like you. But that's part of growth. And in Genesis, the 37th chapter and the 18th verse, he finds out where they are, and he's going to them. And verse 18 says, when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Now I want to make a couple of points here. When they saw him afar off, they knew who he was. He didn't have to get up there close. He didn't have to get up there next to them. While they saw him out there afar off, they knew who he was. And they called him a dreamer. They said, here comes this dreamer. And they said, come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we'll say some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness. Now, Joseph probably felt like he was doing everything right. Here he was with these dreams. They had meaning to them. They represented some things that was going to take place in his life. They had spiritual meaning. He was obeying his father. He was doing what his father wanted him to do. He was helping people, going and checking on people that didn't like him. And that's the way it is a lot of times in our lives spiritually. We think we're doing everything that we can do, everything we know to do. We're, following the word as best as we know how. We're listening to the voice of God to the best of our ability. And then all of a sudden something happens and we wind up in a pit. It's how it feels sometimes. And here you are, and you're in this pit, and you're trapped now. You're stuck here now. You feel like, well, here I am, and I can't go nowhere. And the pit that they put him in, Reuben put him there, and he said, lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. The pit was never meant to destroy him. The pit was never meant to be a setback. The pit was never meant to be something that kept him hindered and kept him away from the Father. The pit was actually to bring him back to the Father. And when God brings a pit into our life, it's always to bring us back to Him. It's to bring us closer to Him again. We look at it like somewhere we don't want to be, but the pit sometimes is actually a good place. That was the best place for Joseph to be at that moment, was in the pit, because if he wasn't in the pit, his brother said, let's kill him. So sometimes when we look at things and we feel like we're not growing and that we feel like we're in a pit, sometimes it might be there for our safety. Sometimes God may put us there to preserve us. And they sold Joseph into slavery, into Egypt, when the Ishmaelites came by and they sold him to them, and they took him to Egypt, and then they sold him to Potiphar. And here he is again now. He's out of the pit, and he's in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's got him doing things, and God's blessing everything that he does. Everything Joseph puts his hand to, God's blessing it. God's making it prosper. He even made Potiphar's house prosper. Everything Potiphar had was blessed. And here Joseph is. He's probably feels like he's growing again. He's coming back up in the ranks, so to speak, and everything's going just right. And then here comes Potiphar's wife. Wants him to do something that he knew he shouldn't do. And when he didn't want to do it, and this is another thing that goes into spiritual growth, is a lot of times people will begin to hate you and begin to lie on you when you don't do what they want to do. When you don't preach like they want to preach, or like they want you to preach. When you don't preach what they want you to preach. When what you're teaching and what you're preaching is goes against, or maybe is contrary to what they believe, then they want to start lying on you. They want to start making false accusations and try to bring you down. And that's exactly what Potiphar's wife done. She tried to get Joseph to lay with her. He wouldn't do it. He fled. She accused him of doing it anyway. And Potiphar then sold him. And where's he go to now? He's in prison. Genesis chapter 39 and verse 20 says, that Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. And Genesis chapter 40 and verse 15 says this about that prison. Joseph said, I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. So he went from a pit to being bound in a dungeon. And that's how it feels a lot of times. He wasn't bound in the first pit, but now the second pit, he's the second dungeon. You know, that's what a dungeon is. It's a pit. It's a hole in the ground that they dig and bury you and put you down in, and it's got bars over it, and you can't get out. And he wasn't only in a pit, but now he was bound in a pit. And it says he was put into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the Bible talks about Joseph being bound. His feet was hurt in fetters, and they bound him in iron. And even Paul, he made a statement one time, and he said, I'm serving Jesus. I'm preaching the gospel. And he said, I've done it to the point where they've bound me and they've put me in bonds. He said, but the word of God is not bound. Even though Joseph was bound, even though he was in a pit, probably felt like his growth had stopped. He went from being over Potiphar's house, over everything that he had, to now he's in the prison. But even though he was in the prison, God made everything that he did in the prison to prosper. He blessed everything that he did. And even though he was bound, the word of God was not bound. That's what Paul said. He said, even though I was bound, the word of God was not bound. Even though Joseph was bound in fetters, the Bible says, until the time that his word came, the word of the Lord tried him. The word wasn't bound. And while he's in prison, the butcher and the baker of Pharaoh is cast into prison. And they dream dreams. Now I want to point out here Joseph's growth. When Joseph was in his father's house, he dreamed dreams. He was put in a pit, sold into Egypt, grew and became Lord over Potiphar's house, then was put into a dungeon. And from the time that Joseph had those two dreams, I never read of where Joseph had another dream. You would think, well, he dreamed these dreams. Why wouldn't he have dreamed other dreams? Because growth was going to come. Now he's in prison. These men come to him and they talk about their dreams. And now he's not dreaming dreams anymore. He's interpreting dreams. See, he grew. He didn't have dreams anymore. Now he's grew to a point where he's an interpreter of dreams. And they tell him their dreams. He interprets them. The interpretations come to pass just like he told them. And this was all part of the growth to bring him to the next part of his life. When the butler remembered Joseph interpreting his dream, when Pharaoh dreamed a dream and no one could interpret it, he remembered Joseph and they brought Joseph forth out of the prison. They brought him to Pharaoh. Pharaoh tells him his dream and he interprets it. And in Genesis, the 41st chapter, verse 38, Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Only in the throne was Pharaoh greater than Joseph because of his growth process. But his growth process wasn't always glamorous. It's kind of like the story we tell to kids a lot of times about the ugly duckling. He was ugly, rejected. None of the other ducks and stuff wanted anything to do with him. Then one day the season of life passed and changes came about. Now he's a beautiful swan. And a lot of times that's how it works spiritually. It looks ugly. You don't know the way of the Spirit. You don't know how the bones grow in the womb. And you don't know the works of God who maketh all. You know, a lot of times we look at the works God's doing and we think, well, why is God working like this? Why has it got to be so ugly? Why has it got to be so, why do I got to feel so bound? Anybody ever felt bound? You was doing everything you knew to do. You was praying, you was fasting, you was seeking God, you was doing it, but you just felt bound. Even though Joseph was bound in the prison, God was still blessing everything that he did. You can be bound and everything you do still be blessed, but you don't feel like anything's happening. All you feel like is, I'm bound. My feet's hurt with these fetters. You know, when fetters are on your feet, you're bound. You know, a lot of times, I know I would. If I was bound, somebody had me prisoner, I'd about gnaw my arm off trying to get loose. In the wild, you know, a lot of animals do that. If they get caught in a trap, they'll gnaw their arm off, just their leg off, just to get out of the trap. And I want to tell us the secret of getting out of the trap. The king sent and loosed him. Just wait on the king. You may be bound right now. There's nowhere you can go, but the king's going to come loose you. When the king comes and looses you, there's no pain involved in it. They even took him, they washed him, they shaved him, gave him clothes, brought him before Pharaoh when the king sent and loosed him. The secret to getting out of the dungeon is just wait for the king to come and loose you. Just keep working. Just keep doing what he wants you to do in the place that you're at, in the season of time that you're in. Now, when Joseph came before Pharaoh and he heard Pharaoh's dream and he told Pharaoh the interpretation, and then he not only told Pharaoh the interpretation of the dream, there's going to be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of want. And those 7 years of want are going to consume the 7 years of plenty. And he not only told him the interpretation, but then he told him what he needed to do. He told him how to prepare for it. He told him, you know, lay up for it, set aside for it, do all this and do all these different things. In Genesis 41 and 38, it says, after Joseph told Pharaoh and Pharaoh's servants and everyone all these things of what to do, it says, Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? You want to know when you're growing? It's not when your brothers can see the Spirit of God in you. It's not when your father can see the Spirit of God in you. It's not when your sisters can see that the Spirit of God is in you. You want to know who saw the Spirit of God in Joseph first? A heathen king. Someone who didn't even know God. Someone who didn't even serve God. Joseph had grown to a point where the heathens could see that the Spirit of God was in him. What Jesus tell his disciples? You're the light of the world. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works. Who was those men? The men of the world. You're growing spiritually when it's not the brother or sister on the pew beside you that can see you're full of the Spirit of God, but when you go out there and they see you and they say that person is full of the Spirit of God. when the heathens are the ones that seeing it, that's when you're growing. So everything starts happening just like Joseph said. They start planting, they start reaping, laying up. The 7 good years are plenteous years, are the earth brought forth by handfuls. And Joseph gathered corn, and he gathered so much that he left off numbering because it was without number. And in Genesis 41, verse 50 and 52, it says, "Unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house." The ones that sold him into slavery, the ones that stripped him of his coat, threw him in the pit, he forgot all that. He forgot everything that they did to him. The first thing that's going to happen in your spiritual growth when you begin to bear fruit is you're going to be able to forget everything that they did to you. Every way that they hurt you just don't matter anymore. Every way they lied on you, every way that they tried to destroy you, everything they tried to strip from you, they did strip it from Joseph. He had that coat of many colors, which was a symbol upon him of the blessing of Jacob upon his life. It represented the favor that he had with his father, and they stripped him of that. Anybody ever felt stripped? He went down into Egypt naked. They stripped it from him. But then he grew, and it says when he brought forth his first son, it was more than just him bringing forth a son. What that represented was the spiritual growth and him being able to forget what they'd done to him. And then in verse 52, he had another son, the name of the second called Ephraim. "For God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." The second way you know you're growing spiritually is when you can be fruitful in affliction. Even though he was afflicted, even though he was in the land of affliction, he was bringing forth fruit. And that's when you're growing, when you can be afflicted but still bring forth fruit to God. So then the plague begins, the drought begins, and all of the country surrounding Egypt is coming to Egypt for corn. Jacob and all his sons, they run out of corn, and he heard there was corn in Egypt, and he told his sons, he said, "Go down to Egypt and buy some corn." So they go down to Egypt. And Joseph was the governor over the land. And he that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And chapter 42 of Genesis in verse 7 says this: Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. Verse 8. Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. He had grown to a place where even his brothers didn't recognize him. He had grown so much spiritually that his brothers didn't even recognize who he was anymore. These were the ones that stripped everything from him. These were the ones that threw him in the pit. These were the ones that spake of killing him. These were the ones that envied him, hated him. Now I want to show you something else. They hadn't grew one bit because he still knew them. This all happened over a period of years. Joseph was a boy when he was sold into Egypt, around 17. He was about 30 years old or so, in his 30s now at this point. In 30 years, he had grew, or in a few years, 10 plus years, he had grew to a point where his brothers didn't even recognize him anymore. But they had went through the same 10 years, and he still knew them. They still looked the same. They were still just like they was. They were still those envious ones. They were still those murderers. They were still those that despised him. They hadn't changed. But Joseph had grew to a place where they didn't even know who he was anymore. That's the kind of growth I want in me. That when all those that tried to strip me, all those that tried to kill me, all those that tried to bring me down, all those that tried to sell me into captivity, and all the things, when our lives finally come back together, I still know who they are. They don't even recognize me anymore because I've grew to a point where I'm unrecognizable. We know the story how Joseph loaded them down with corn, sent them back. When they went back to Jacob, they didn't know Joseph. They didn't know who he was. They didn't recognize him. But when they came back and spake of him, they didn't say the ruler of the land there, the man that's over the land, he's thus and thus. He's small, he's whatever. When they came back and told Jacob about it, they said he's Lord of the land. He went from a dreamer to Lord. He grew from a dreamer to Lord over the land. And then when they came back the second time to get corn, Genesis chapter 45 and verse 1 says, Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he said, he told them, he said, don't be grieved or angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. Another thing that's going to happen when you're growing is when you realize that it wasn't them that did it, but it was God that sent him before. Yeah, his brethren sold him. They sold him into Egypt. They did all the things they did, but he said, no, it really wasn't you. God sent me before you to preserve life. And he told them how there's been famine in the land. There's for 2 years now. It's going to be 5 more years. And he said, God sent me before you to preserve you. God sent him to preserve them. We want to kill them. We want vengeance on them. We do. That's what we would want. We'd want to kill these people that done us wrong. We'd want the same thing that was done to us to be done to them, and they be stripped of everything, and that everything be took away from them. And he said, no, God sent me to preserve you. When you can begin to preserve the people that's run you down and killed you and spoke against you and stripped you of everything, when you can begin to preserve them, that's when you know you're growing. And he said, in chapter 45 and verse 7, God sent me before you to preserve you and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children. Who was Jacob's children? All them that tried to kill Joseph, all them that wanted to kill him, all those that cast him into the pit, all those that stripped him of everything. He said, you're going to be near me. You know you're growing when those people, you can bring them near to you. And not just bring them near. He said, you're going to be near. But verse 11 said, there will I nourish you. When you can begin to nourish the ones that stripped you, that tried to destroy you, that sold you into slavery, when you can begin to nourish them, that's when you know growth is happening. That's when you know you're growing. And Jacob told Joseph, when he sent him to check on his brethren, he said, I want you to go check on them. I want you to see how they are, how the flocks are, and everything. And he said, I want you to bring me word again. Joseph obeyed his father, and he did everything his father said, except that part because he didn't get to. He went and checked on his brethren. He went and checked on the flocks. He just never got to bring him word again. But in Genesis 45 and 25, starting at 25, it says, they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he's a dreamer over all the land of Egypt. No, they said he's governor. Who they once called dreamer, now they're calling governor. And they knew. They called him Lord over the land before they knew, but now after they knew, they called him governor. He's the ruler. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. His heart fainted when he heard that Joseph was still alive. But you know what revived it? When they told him all the words of Joseph, and he saw the wagons that he'd sent. That word that Jacob said, bring me again, when he heard Joseph's words, and he saw the wagons, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. You know you've grown when you can speak words that bring life and revive people. And when Joseph sent them back, remember when Joseph came to his brethren to see how they were, they stripped him of his coat. They took from him and took his clothes. When he sent them back to get Jacob, he gave them changes of raiment. He didn't take from them like they took from him. He gave to them a change of raiment because he wanted them to change. He wanted them to be like he was. He didn't want them to stay in that same unrecognizable state or same recognizable state that they was in when they came to him. He knew them. They hadn't changed one bit. He gave them a change of raiment because he wanted them to change and be different. He wanted them to grow. And as I close today, Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20 says, but as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. You know you're growing when you can see that when evil is against you, but God means it for good, and he can use it to save much people alive. A lot of times as they come get ready to sing, a lot of times we may not feel like we're growing.